A woman gets fired for feeding a homeless stranger. An act of kindness that costs her everything. She's heartbroken, broke, and branded a troublemaker. Until the diner doors swing open and a tattooed biker walks in. The entire place falls silent when he looks at her and says one word. Mom. But this isn't just a reunion. This biker carries a secret past, a dangerous world, and a debt of love that's about to test everything she believes in. As rumors spread, her kindness becomes a scandal, and her faith becomes her only weapon. Can one woman's compassion heal a man the world has written off, or will her love cost her everything? Again? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. The morning sun rose slow over the Arizona desert, spilling gold across the dusty highway and the chrome of parked trucks outside Tommy's Truck Stop Diner. Inside, the smell of bacon, coffee, and toast filled the air. The grill hissed. The radio hummed low with country tunes. It was another ordinary morning, or so everyone thought. Martha Keegan moved from table to table, balancing plates like a dance she had done for 20 years. Her gray hair was tucked neatly under a hairnet, and her smile came easy, even when her knees ached. "Mornin', honey," she said to a trucker with a wink. "Coffee's strong enough to wake the dead, just how you like it." The man laughed, grateful. People came here for that warmth. Martha was more than a waitress. She was part of the diner's soul. To the regulars, she was everyone's mom. But that morning, as she wiped down the counter, something caught her eye. Outside, across the parking lot, a woman stood by the window, hugging a torn trash bag to her chest. Her clothes hung loose and dirty. Her face was pale, eyes hollow, hair matted beneath a torn cap. The woman stared through the glass at the plates of food as if they were treasures behind glass. Martha's heart tugged. It was cold out there, wind biting through thin fabric. She looked toward the kitchen where Ray, the manager, was counting bills by the register. "Ray," she called softly. "There's someone out there. Poor thing looks half frozen. Can I bring her something hot?" Ray didn't look up. "Don't start, Martha. You know company policy. No freebies. We get in trouble if word gets out." "She's not asking for trouble," Martha said gently. "She's hungry." Ray sighed, shaking his head. "You give 1 meal away, 10 more show up. You want to feed people, do it on your own time." Martha pressed her lips together, feeling that small ache in her chest again. The one she'd felt ever since her husband died, and the world got a little colder. "Fine," she whispered, "on my own time." She grabbed a bowl, filled it with oatmeal, added raisins, and drizzled a little honey on top. Then she poured a cup of hot coffee and stepped outside. The wind hit her face, sharp and dry. The woman flinched at first, clutching her bag tighter. "It's all right," Martha said, her voice kind and steady. "You look like you could use something warm." The woman hesitated, eyes darting toward the diner door. "They'll fire you," she whispered. "Maybe," Martha said with a small smile, "but you look colder than I do." She handed her the bowl. The woman's hands trembled as she took it, eyes filling with tears. She whispered, "Thank you, ma'am. God bless you." "What's your name, sweetheart?" Martha asked. "Sharon," the woman said softly before taking her first careful bite. Martha stayed for a few minutes, just to make sure Sharon ate. Steam rose from the cup between them, and for a moment the world felt quiet, just two souls sharing warmth against the chill. What Martha didn't notice was the man by the gas pump, phone in hand, filming. When she returned inside, Ray was waiting. His face was red, jaw tight. "You just couldn't help yourself, could you?" She was starving, Ray. I couldn't. You're done, he cut her off. The owner's been watching the cameras. He called 5 minutes ago. You're out. The room went still. The clatter of silverware stopped. Martha blinked. You're firing me? For feeding someone? For breaking policy, Ray said flatly. Hand over your apron. Her chest tightened. 20 years of serving, smiling, never late. Gone in seconds. She untied her apron and laid it on the counter. For a heartbeat, she thought of fighting back, but her voice caught. Instead, she picked up her purse and walked out into the parking lot. The sun had climbed higher now, but the air still felt cold. Sharon was gone. The bowl sat on the curb, empty. Martha looked at it, then back at the diner's windows. The neon sign buzzed faintly, the words Tommy's Diner blinking in red. Her reflection stared back at her, tired, kind, and suddenly very small in the wide desert morning. As she walked to her car, the tears came quietly. Not because she was angry, but because she knew the world had changed in a way that hurt deep down, in a way that said, kindness had become a crime. By the time she reached her small apartment on the edge of town, the story had already begun spreading. Her neighbor, a kind woman named June, met her at the stairs, holding her phone out. Martha, you're all over the internet. Look! On the screen, a video played. Martha handing the bowl to Sharon, smiling gently. The caption read, Diner worker fired for feeding homeless woman. Corporate cruelty or common sense? Martha's heart pounded. Thousands of comments scrolled by. Some called her an angel. Others called her foolish. I didn't want this, she said quietly. June smiled. Maybe you didn't, but people need to see what kindness looks like again. That night, Martha sat by her window, watching headlights pass on the highway. Her small apartment felt emptier than usual. She missed the hum of the diner, the laughter, the clang of coffee cups. But she didn't regret feeding Sharon. Not for a second. She whispered a prayer, asking for strength and a little light for the road ahead. She didn't know then that God was already at work, that in just a few days, her life would be turned upside down again. Because somewhere out there, a man in a leather jacket was riding back into town. A man who had once called her Mom. And this time, the world would see that one act of kindness can change everything. The next morning, Martha woke to the sharp ring of her old landline. The sun had barely touched the edge of the blinds. Her room was still gray and cool, the air smelling faintly of lemon cleaner and coffee grounds from yesterday. For a second, she hoped it was the diner calling to say it had all been a mistake. She reached for the phone with a sleepy, aching hand. Hello? Ma'am, this is Channel 7. We'd like to talk to you about the video. Martha sat up straighter. The video? The one where you gave food to a homeless woman. It's everywhere. People are calling you an angel. Can we come by? Her heart stumbled. I didn't do anything special. Folks think you did. 10 minutes? She almost said no. She almost hung up and hid under the quilt. But the call ended with a bright, "See you soon?" And then the room was quiet again. She looked at her nightstand. The photo of her late husband, Paul, leaned against a lamp base. He was smiling the way he always had when he held a fish he caught, proud and shy at once. What would you do? She asked the picture. She already knew the answer. Paul would say, "Tell the truth, love, that's all." She pulled on a soft blue sweater and brushed her hair until it lay smooth. The mirror showed lines around her mouth and eyes that she knew by heart. She pressed her palm against her chest and felt her heart steady. By the time she brewed a small pot of coffee, there was a knock. A young woman with a ponytail stood in the doorway with a cameraman. She introduced herself as Lila and stepped in with quick, excited movements. The camera looked like a small robot, blinking red. "Thank you for seeing us," Lila said, setting a tiny microphone on Martha's collar. "We'll be quick. Can you tell us why you did it?" Martha folded her hands in her lap. "Because she was hungry." Lila tilted her head. "Did you worry about breaking company rules?" "I did," Martha said. "But some rules feel wrong when you look into someone's eyes." Lila nodded, and for a moment the excitement left her face. Something softer showed up there. "People are sending messages from everywhere," she said. "They're saying your kindness gave them hope." Martha glanced around her small, clean apartment. The plant on the sill needed water. The calendar next to the fridge had rent due circled in red. "Hope is good," she said quietly. "Rent is due too." They laughed a little, and the sound eased the tightness in her chest. When the camera turned off, Lila reached into her purse. "I brought you a gift card," she said, cheeks pink. "Just groceries. I know it's not much." "It's more than you know," Martha said, eyes burning. After they left, the phone started again. June, the neighbor from 3B. A man from a church she didn't know. A radio station from Flagstaff. The noise of it all pressed around her, and she set the receiver down and let the machine take the rest. She ate toast with a smear of peanut butter and looked out at the parking lot. The sky was a clean blue. A stray cat slid along the edge of the dumpster, neat and cautious. The world kept moving. By 10, her cupboards had 1 can of soup, a couple of potatoes, and a bag of flour. She wrote a list and walked to the discount market, the desert wind tugging at her sweater. People stared as she passed, then smiled or waved. A few whispered. One woman touched her arm and said, "You made me cry last night." Another man said, "You did the right thing." Someone else muttered, "Rules are rules." At the store, she bought eggs, milk, a sack of rice. At the register, the total made her jaw tighten. She paid anyway, using the gift card and a few worn bills. "God will provide," she told herself, the old prayer, as small and steady as a heartbeat. Outside, she took a deep breath and decided to find Sharon. She remembered the shelter staff talking about the day room near the bus depot. She rode the bus with her grocery bag on her knees, watching sunlight slide over the dry hills and the cacti like hands. Her reflection in the window looked calm, but inside she felt like a child on her first day of school. The day room was a plain building with a painted mural of hands passing a loaf of bread. Inside, a volunteer at the desk looked up and smiled. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for a woman named Sharon," Martha said. "I brought her breakfast yesterday. I wanted to see if she was all right." The volunteer's smile widened. "You're the lady from the video. She's been talking about you." She pointed down the hall. "Second door on the left. She's sorting canned goods." Martha walked down the hall, her shoes soft on the waxed floor. She paused at the open door. Sharon stood at a table, stacking green beans and peaches into neat rows. Her hair was pulled into a low ponytail. Her hands were clean. When she looked up, her face broke into a shy, grateful smile. "You found me," Sharon said. "I wanted to." Martha set the grocery bag by the door and stepped into the small room. "How are you feeling today?" "Better," Sharon said. "They let me shower. I'm helping here so I can stay the night. The rules are strict but fair." She hesitated. "I'm trying to stay clean." "I messed up a lot. It's hard to say that out loud. You made it easier." Martha moved closer. "I'm glad you're here." They spent the next hour shoulder to shoulder, stacking cans and talking about small things, the taste of real coffee, The good ache of clean sheets, the way a kind word could lift a whole day. When a counselor came by to check the schedule, he asked if Martha would consider doing a short talk at the community meeting that evening. The town had set up a listening night to discuss homelessness, the video having stirred people up. "A talk?" Martha said, startled. "I'm not much for speeches." "You don't need a speech," the counselor said. "Just your story. People listen to a true story." She heard Paul again in her head. "Tell the truth, love." She nodded. "All right." On the bus ride home, she felt every bump in the road and every flutter in her stomach. She stopped by June's to borrow a scarf and a little courage. June fussed over her like a sister, wrapped the scarf around her shoulders, and pressed a lipstick into her hand. "You'll be wonderful," June said. "Talk like you talk to me." By late afternoon, the sun slid down the sky, soft and peach-colored, and the community center parking lot filled. Inside, the room smelled like coffee and folding chairs. People from all over town gathered. Teachers, retirees, shop owners, teens in hoodies, men with calloused hands, a few folks in suits. There were city council members at a long table with cups and name tags and pens. Martha stood near the back, listening to the first speakers. Some spoke about safety. Some spoke about kindness. A man told a story about his brother who lived under a bridge. A woman cried quietly and said she was tired of stepping over people on the sidewalk. The room was a mix of grief and worry and hope. When someone called her name, "Would the lady from the diner come up?" The room turned toward her. Her knees felt like water. She walked to the front in slow, careful steps and took the microphone with both hands. "I'm not a public speaker," she said, her voice shaking. "I'm a waitress, or I was. My name is Martha. Yesterday I fed a hungry woman. I didn't do it to break rules. I did it because I couldn't bear to see hunger on the other side of a warm window." The room grew very still. She glanced at a row of teenagers who were trying to look bored, and saw that one girl had tears in her eyes. "I don't know the perfect answer," Martha went on. "I know we have to be safe. I know rules exist for reasons. But I also know this. A hot bowl and a kind word can be the first step out of the dark. I have needed that first step myself. After my husband died, kindness kept me standing." She took a breath and looked around. "If we can find a way to follow rules and still be human, we'll sleep better at night. That's all I want to share." A hush held for a moment. Then the room rose in, a soft wave of applause. Not loud. Not wild. Just warm. Some people stood, others nodded, as if they had been waiting to hear something simple and honest. Afterward, many came to thank her. A teacher pressed a small envelope into her hand. "A little class fund we took up." A man in a baseball cap said he could fix a broken van window if she ever needed it. Someone else asked if she would help at the soup kitchen on Friday nights. The offers piled up like small stones building a path. When the crowd thinned and the lights buzzed overhead, she slipped out into the cool evening. The sky had turned dark blue with bright pinpoints of stars. She walked home slowly, the scarf tucked close to her throat, the envelope and a lipstick warm in her pocket. Her feet hurt, but her heart felt light. She reached the corner where Tommy's Diner stood, its neon sign bleeding red onto the sidewalk. The windows reflected the night, but something else caught her eye. Spray paint, fresh and harsh, cut across the glass in jagged letters. "Bleeding Heart Sellout." Her stomach dropped. The letters looked like a shout that had been frozen in place. She stepped closer. Paint fumes nipped at her nose. Inside, a young hostess was on the phone, eyes wide. Ray stood behind her, mouth set in a thin line. He saw Martha through the glass and stopped, guilt flickering across his face. He started toward the door, then thought better of it and turned away. Martha didn't move for a long breath. The word sellout stung. She stared until the letters blurred. Then she straightened her shoulders and whispered, "Love is not for sale." The words came out sure, like they had been waiting in her mouth. She walked the last blocks home with steady steps. In the stairwell, June opened her door and called out, "Well, how did it go?" "People listened," Martha said, "and someone shouted with a can of paint." June clicked her tongue, then pulled her into a quick hug. "Some folks swing fists when they're afraid. You keep using that soft voice. It does more." In her apartment, Martha set the envelope on the table, rinsed a mug, and poured hot water over a tea bag. She sat by the window and watched the lights sweep past on the highway. The night held both kindness and cruelty. Maybe it always did. She rested one hand on her chest and felt the slow, even beat under her palm. The phone flashed with new messages she didn't have the energy to hear. She cupped the tea and let steam touch her face. Tomorrow would come with its own work. Maybe a visit to the shelter, maybe a call about odd jobs, maybe a plan she couldn't see yet. She was tired, but she was not afraid. Across town, engines rumbled in a low pack. A man in a leather vest rode at the front, headlights cutting through the dark. He had a burned place in his heart where a mother's voice used to be. He didn't know yet that the voice he missed was only a few miles away, waiting on the other side of a thin wall and a window washed by starlight. Martha finished her tea, turned off the lamp, and slipped into bed. Before sleep pulled her under, she whispered the same small prayer she had said since she was a girl. "Lead me, Lord." The room settled. Outside, the desert held its breath, as if it knew the road was bending toward a meeting no one could stop. The next few days rolled by like soft thunder. Martha tried to keep busy, cleaning the apartment, calling her sister, checking in at the shelter. But under the surface, worry gnawed at her. The phone still rang sometimes, reporters wanting a new quote or photo, but the noise had already begun to fade. Kindness burned bright in people's minds, then moved on to the next story. Her savings were thinning. Rent was due in a week. Still, she told herself she had enough. Enough rice, enough grace, enough faith to stretch one more week. On Friday morning, she stepped outside to drive to the grocery store and froze. Her car leaned sideways, tires slashed clean through. The morning sun glared off the broken rubber. Someone had left a note under the wiper in thick black marker. "Stay out of it." She felt the tremor start low in her stomach. A neighbor passing by gasped. "You should call the police, Martha." She did. The officer who came was polite but distant, his sunglasses reflecting her pale face. He took a few notes, looked around, and said, "We've had some vandalism lately. Mostly kids, or maybe those bikers stirring up trouble again." "Bikers?" she asked. He shrugged. "Group calls themselves the Hounds of Mercy. Used to be rough, claim they're reformed. Some people don't believe it. You probably just got unlucky." When he left, she stood in the quiet lot, the heat rising from the asphalt. She didn't know any bikers. She didn't know why anyone would care enough to scare her. That Sunday, the pastor at the church called. "Martha, would you share your story at the morning service? People need hope." Her first instinct was to say no, but something in his voice, tired and kind, made her say yes. Maybe her story could help someone. The church was full that morning. White-haired women in pressed blouses, farmers with sun-browned faces, families with restless children. It seemed the whole town had come. When Martha stepped to the pulpit, her hands trembled, but her voice did not. "I fed a hungry woman," she began. "I didn't know it would make news. I just knew it was right." She told them about Sharon, about the coffee steaming in the cold air, about how fear can make people forget mercy. "Sometimes we talk about love like it's easy, but love costs something, and it's worth the cost." When she finished, silence filled the room, deep and full. Then, one by one, people stood to clap. The sound grew until it shook the rafters. After the service, a few strangers hugged her. "You made me believe again," one woman said. A young man whispered, "My mom needed to hear that." That evening, Martha walked home feeling lighter. The sun had dropped low, turning the desert gold. She carried a small bouquet someone had pressed into her hand at the church door. Maybe this was how God stitched broken hearts, one act of courage at a time. As she turned the corner near Tommy's diner, she froze. The parking lot was crowded, not with cars, but with roaring motorcycles. Leather vests gleamed under the neon lights, their backs marked with a snarling hound's head. Men laughed and shouted, tossing bottles, revving engines. Her eyes darted to the diner's windows. Inside, Ray was on the phone, pacing. She stepped closer, clutching her flowers. Then she saw it. The dumpster behind the diner, flames licking upward, smoke curling into the night. Someone yelled, "That'll teach them!" Without thinking, Martha ran towards the fire. "Stop, you'll hurt someone!" The crowd went still. One man turned, a mountain of a man, tall, broad, his beard streaked with gray, tattoos snaked down his arms. His eyes caught hers, and for a long second the world fell silent. "Martha?" he whispered, voice rough and disbelieving. She blinked, heart pounding. "Do I know you?" He took a step closer, his breath catching like a sob. "You don't remember me? It's me. Luke." His voice cracked. "Mom?" The word hit her like a thunderclap. She stared, her mind reaching backward through decades, through the foster home, the boy with the scraped knees and scared eyes who used to hum to himself when he couldn't sleep. "Luke?" she breathed. He nodded, eyes glistening. Around them, the other bikers shifted, uncertain. The fire crackled. Police sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Martha whispered, "You called me Mom." "I never stopped," he said. "Not once." In that instant, the years between them vanished. The fear, the noise, the smoke, all of it faded. There was only the shock of finding something long thought lost, standing in front of her, wearing a leather vest and the scars of a hard life. As the sirens drew near, Luke looked at her with a strange mix of shame and pride. "I didn't start this, Mom. I swear I didn't." She nodded slowly, not sure what any of it meant, only that this moment had cracked open her quiet world again. "Then we'll figure it out," she said softly. The flames hissed as firefighters arrived, spraying foam and shouting orders. Ray watched from the doorway, eyes wide. Luke turned back to his bike, shouting to his men, "We're done here!" The engines roared, and one by one, the motorcycles peeled away into the desert night. Martha stood in the glow of the flashing lights, the bouquet still in her hand, petals trembling in the breeze. Somewhere inside her, something stirred, a mix of fear, awe, and a strange, wild hope. Her lost boy had come home. And though she didn't know it yet, this was only the beginning of the miracle. The next morning, the world felt strange, like the air itself had changed. Martha barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that man's face in the firelight. Luke's face, but older, harder, scarred by life. "Mom," he had called her. The word still echoed in her mind. She sat at her kitchen table, fingers curled around a mug of cold coffee. The clock ticked, slow and steady, while sunlight crept across the linoleum. Could it really be him? She hadn't seen Luke since he was 12. They'd tried to adopt him, but the system had taken him back after his birth mother reappeared, and then vanished again. The memory still stung, a wound that had never quite healed. Her phone buzzed, breaking the silence. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. Hello? A man's voice came through, rough but careful. It's Luke. She caught her breath. Luke. I didn't mean to scare you last night. I shouldn't have come around the diner like that. We didn't start that fire. I just needed to see if it was really you. Martha pressed her hand over her chest. It's been so long. I thought you were gone. I almost was, more than once, he said quietly. Can we talk? Somewhere calmer? She thought for a moment. There's a coffee shop by the park. 10 o'clock? I'll be there. The cafe was small and sunlit, with mismatched chairs and the smell of cinnamon rolls. Martha arrived early, nerves fluttering like birds in her stomach. She sat near the window, twisting her napkin into small folds. The bell over the door jingled. Luke stepped in. Even in daylight, he looked larger than life. Broad shoulders, faded tattoos winding up his arms, hair tied back in a leather strap. His jeans were worn, his boots dusty. But when his eyes met hers, something soft flickered there. The boy she'd once known. Martha Keegan, he said, voice low, like he was afraid she might vanish. Sit down, Luke, she whispered. Tell me everything. He did. Slowly, between sips of black coffee, the years spilled out. After he was taken from her home, he'd bounced between foster families and the streets. By 16, he was running with gangs. Prison followed. Drugs. Violence. Then, one day, a man from a veteran outreach program took him in. An old biker who preached redemption over revenge. That man became his mentor. Together they built the Hounds of Mercy, a group of ex-cons and lost souls who fed the homeless, repaired houses, and offered shelter to addicts. We get a bad rap because of how we look, Luke said, staring into his cup. Leather, tattoos, engines. People think it's trouble, but we've saved more lives than folks know. Martha listened, her eyes glistening. So that woman I fed, Sharon, she's one of yours? Luke nodded. She's part of our outreach. Been clean a few months. We were keeping an eye on her. Martha leaned back, heart swelling. Then maybe it wasn't an accident. Maybe we were meant to cross paths again. Luke looked at her then, eyes shining with something raw and unguarded. You're the only person who ever called me good. I tried to live up to that. Some days I still can't believe I get a second chance. Martha smiled, tears slipping free. We all get second chances, sometimes even third and fourth. He chuckled softly. You haven't changed, Mom. The word made her throat tighten. I missed hearing that, she whispered. They sat in silence for a moment, the past between them like a soft echo. Luke straightened, clearing his throat. There's more you should know. The fire last night. Someone set us up. A rival gang. They deal drugs and don't like that we run sober houses. They want to make us look bad? Do the police believe you? He shook his head. Not yet. We've got a record, and that's all they see. Martha reached across the table, her small hand covering his rough one. You've come too far to let them drag you back down. Promise me you won't fight fire with fire. His jaw tightened, but he nodded. I promise. When they stood to leave, the sunlight caught the metal chain around his neck. Hanging from it was a small cross, bent and scratched but shining. You kept it, Martha said softly. He looked down at it, surprised she remembered. You gave it to me the day they took me away. I prayed you'd find your way home, she said. He smiled then, tired but real. Guess prayers work after all. That evening, back in her apartment, Martha sat by the window again, watching the sky blush into sunset. The desert stretched wide and golden, full of quiet promise. She thought of Luke, her lost boy, her found son, and of Sharon, still trying to build her life from ashes. Maybe all of them were. The world said broken people stayed broken. But Martha had learned that grace had its own kind of stubbornness. It showed up in the places nobody expected. She picked up her Bible, the pages worn and soft, and whispered, "Thank you for bringing him home." Then, as the stars began to shine above the dark desert hills, she smiled through her tears. Tomorrow she would visit the Hounds of Mercy. If God was giving her a second chance to be a mother, she wasn't about to waste it. The next morning dawned bright and windless, the Arizona sky a wide bowl of blue. Martha rose early, her heart steady but eager. She made herself a small breakfast, 1 egg, a slice of toast, and a cup of coffee, and then packed a paper sack with cookies she'd baked the night before. Her hands trembled just a little as she tied the bag shut. She drove to the edge of town where Luke had told her the Hounds of Mercy kept their base. It was an old warehouse with faded red paint and a broken sign that once read "Truck Parts." The parking lot was lined with motorcycles, gleaming in the sun like steel horses. For a moment, Martha hesitated. It wasn't fear exactly, but a quiet nervousness. The kind that comes before stepping into a world you don't quite understand. She smoothed her skirt, whispered a prayer, and walked toward the door. Inside, the warehouse was dim but alive with movement. Men were stacking boxes, patching walls, and scrubbing tables. The air smelled of oil, dust, and chili simmering in a big pot. Someone had hung a banner made from a bedsheet that read, "Welcome home, brother." Luke spotted her first. He crossed the room in long strides, grinning like a boy. "You came." "Of course I came," Martha said. "I promised." She held up the bag. "I brought cookies." His laugh was soft but real. "Mama Kay, you don't waste time." The name spread through the room like a warm breeze. Mama Kay. The men nodded respectfully as she passed. Some shy, some curious. Many were rough-looking. Tattoos, scars, missing teeth. But when they smiled, the hardness fell away. Luke led her deeper inside. "This is our main spot. We feed whoever walks through those doors. Homeless folks, vets, addicts trying to go clean. It's not fancy, but it's safe." Martha looked around and felt her heart twist. The tables were mismatched, the chairs wobbly, the stove dented, but everything was alive with effort and purpose. In one corner, a woman stirred soup over a portable burner. When she turned, Martha gasped. "Sharon?" The woman smiled shyly, wiping her hands on a towel. "I was hoping I'd see you again." Martha hurried over and hugged her tight. "You look stronger." "Thanks to these guys," Sharon said. "They let me help in the kitchen. Feels good to be useful again." Martha looked at Luke, pride softening her eyes. "You built something good here." He shrugged. "Took long enough. But when I got out of prison, I decided I wasn't done. I wanted to be the man you always said I could be." Her throat tightened. "You already are." They spent the afternoon working side by side. Martha tied on an apron and began sorting vegetables. Sharon showed her how to stretch 1 bag of beans into a meal for 20. The men lined up, joking and laughing, waiting for dinner. As she served bowls of soup, Martha listened. Each man had a story, a veteran haunted by nightmares, a father trying to get clean so he could see his kids again, a young man who said prison was easier than forgiveness, Martha didn't judge. She listened, smiled, and offered second helpings. When evening came, the room quieted. People sat around folding tables, eating slowly, heads bowed in thought. The sunset poured through the high windows, painting the walls gold. Luke stood by the door, arms crossed, watching her. When their eyes met, he smiled, a little embarrassed. They've been through a lot. You being here means more than you know. She smiled back. I'm the one who's blessed. After dinner, the men began cleaning up. Martha helped Sharon wash dishes in an old metal sink. I thought I'd lost everything, Sharon said softly. But it feels like God was waiting for me to hit bottom so I'd finally look up. Martha nodded, blinking back tears. That's how grace works. It finds you right where you fall. When the last plate was stacked and the lights dimmed, Luke walked her to her car. The sky was deep purple now, dotted with stars. You sure you're safe driving home this late? He asked. I've been driving these roads since before you were born, she teased. Then, more serious, I'm proud of you, Luke. He looked down, his rough voice low. I never thought I'd hear you say that again. She touched his arm. You were lost, not gone. There's a difference. He exhaled, eyes shining. You really believe people can change, don't you? I don't just believe it, she said softly. I've seen it, he chuckled. You always were the stubborn one. And you were always worth the trouble, she replied. They stood there for a moment, mother and son under the same stretch of stars that had watched them both through years of distance. Then she got in her car, rolled down the window and said, You need anything, you call me, no matter the hour. He nodded. Yes, ma'am. As she drove away, she caught sight of him in her mirror, standing tall in the glow of the streetlight, watching her go. When she reached home, the night felt softer. Her apartment no longer seemed quite so empty. She poured herself a cup of tea, sat by the window, and thought of all she had seen that day. The laughter, the food, the hope flickering to life in tired eyes. For the first time in years, Martha felt she had found her place again, not behind a diner counter, but in the heart of a family she hadn't even known she'd been missing. She looked up at the sky and whispered, Thank you. Somewhere out there, she knew, Luke was whispering the same. The morning air smelled faintly of rain and dust. Martha stood outside the warehouse, her hands on her hips as she watched Luke and two of his men push an old white van out from the back lot. The paint was peeling, the tires flat, and a spider web of rust crawled up one side. But to her, it looked like hope on wheels. This old thing, she said, grinning. You sure it's not going to fall apart on us? Luke laughed, wiping grease off his hands. Not if Diesel here keeps it alive. He's the best mechanic this side of the state. A tall, broad man with a beard and twinkling blue eyes straightened from under the hood. Ma'am, he said politely, tipping his cap. She's got good bones, just needs a little love, like the rest of us. Martha chuckled. Then we're in good company. The plan had come to her the night before. She couldn't stop thinking about the people who never made it to the Hound's warehouse, the ones sleeping in alleys or by the bus depot. What if they brought the food to them? She'd pitched the idea, that morning over coffee, and Luke had loved it immediately. We'll call it Grace on Wheels, she'd said. Now, standing before the rusty van, she could almost see the dream taking shape. For the next few days, the warehouse buzzed with energy. Men sanded, painted, and fixed the van's engine. Sharon and Martha planned simple meals they could make in bulk: stews, chili, cornbread, and strong coffee. Someone found a small generator and mounted it inside. Diesel painted bold letters on the side in red. Grace on wheels, free meals, warm hearts. When Martha saw it finished, her eyes stung with tears. The first run was set for Friday evening. They loaded the van with pots, paper cups, and a radio that played soft country music. Martha rode in the passenger seat, wearing her favorite blue sweater and a borrowed biker jacket over it. Sharon sat in the back, laughing nervously. As they pulled into town, heads turned. The van rattled but held steady. Luke drove carefully, his hands sure on the wheel. They parked near the city park where homeless folks gathered at dusk. Martha stepped out, her heart racing. The air smelled of rain and earth. People watched curiously as she lifted a ladle and called out, "Hot chili! Come get some!" For a few seconds, no one moved. Then one man stood, a thin veteran with a limp, and came forward. Martha smiled and handed him a steaming bowl. "No questions, no cost," she said softly. "Just supper." Soon a line formed. Sharon handed out cornbread, Luke poured coffee, and Martha talked to everyone who came by. She learned names, stories, small sorrows. One woman wept when Martha remembered her name a second time. By the time the pot was empty, laughter filled the night. Someone played a harmonica. The scent of chili and gratitude hung in the cool air. A local reporter showed up with a camera, snapping pictures. "This is incredible," he said. "Who started this?" Martha tried to step back, but Luke nudged her forward. "She did," he said proudly. The next day, her face was on the front page of the local paper. Mama Kay and her biker sons feed the forgotten. Messages flooded in. People dropped off donations, bags of beans, vegetables, blankets, and coffee. The church offered to host fundraisers. A retired sign painter even volunteered to repaint the van with angel wings on each side. Martha didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "I don't deserve this attention," she told Sharon one evening as they washed dishes. Sharon smiled. "Maybe not. But grace doesn't ask if we deserve it. It just shows up." A few weeks later, they were invited to a community dinner hosted at the church to celebrate the outreach work. Martha stood at the buffet table, overwhelmed by the crowd's warmth. People hugged her, thanked her, and pressed notes of encouragement into her hands. Luke sat near the back with the hounds, trying to look invisible, but it didn't work. Folks came to shake his hand, thank him for helping, offer to donate supplies. He handled it humbly, his voice soft, his eyes down. During dessert, the pastor stood and said, "Sometimes angels wear aprons and ride motorcycles." The room laughed, and Martha blushed, her hands shaking. She looked at Luke then, and he smiled. A quiet, thankful smile that said everything words couldn't. Later that night, after the tables were cleared and the lights dimmed, Martha and Luke loaded leftovers into the van. The moon hung low over the desert, full and bright. "I never thought I'd see a day like this," Luke said quietly, leaning against the van. "People looking at us without fear." Martha handed him a piece of pie wrapped in foil. "You earned it." He shook his head. "You did. I just followed your lead." She smiled. "We followed love's lead." They stood there in the soft silver light, the hum of crickets filling the air, feeling, for once, like the world was mending itself, one meal at a time. But as Martha drove home, she noticed a dark car following them for a few blocks. Its headlights stayed steady in the mirror, never passing, never falling back. When she turned onto her street, it turned too. Her heart thudded. She slowed near her building, watching as the car finally rolled past and disappeared into the night. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was just her imagination. Still, she sat for a long moment in the quiet car, whispering, "Lord, keep us safe." She didn't know that the peace she felt that night was fragile, that shadows were already gathering just beyond the reach of the headlights. A week later, the nights had grown cooler, and the moon came up sharp over the desert hills. Martha had grown used to the rhythm of her days again, mornings baking cornbread, afternoons helping Sharon at the shelter, evenings with Grace on wheels. It felt good, almost peaceful. But peace in this world rarely stayed long. That Monday morning, she came out to the warehouse early, hoping to get a head start on cleaning. The moment she turned into the lot, her heart sank. The van's windows were shattered, tires slashed again, red spray paint screamed across the side, fake saints. Sharon gasped beside her. Who would do this? Luke stood still for a long moment, fists tightening at his sides. The other bikers gathered around, their faces grim. Diesel knelt beside the tire, jaw clenched. Same kind of knife marks as before, he muttered. This wasn't random. Luke's eyes hardened. The vultures, he said quietly. They've been sniffing around ever since we started feeding people in their spots. They don't like anyone messing with their drug trade. Martha turned to him. What are you going to do? He looked at her, and for a second she saw the boy he used to be, hurt, angry, wanting to fight. What do you think? She stepped closer, voice calm but firm. I think you're not that boy anymore. The words seemed to land like a soft weight. Luke drew in a deep breath, then let it out slowly. You're right, he said. I'm not. That night, they gathered inside the warehouse. The damage had left everyone shaken. Martha brewed coffee for the men, while Diesel worked on patching the van windows with cardboard. Sharon lit candles and began humming softly, the tune echoing against the bare walls. This is how they want it, Luke said to the group. They want us angry. They want us to fight. But we don't give them what they want. Martha smiled quietly to herself. Maybe the lesson was finally sinking in. The next morning, she rode with Luke to the hardware store to buy supplies. On the way, she noticed how tired he looked. You're carrying too much, she said gently. I'm used to it. You shouldn't have to be. He glanced at her and gave a small, crooked smile. I forget you can still read me like a book. I never stopped being your mother, she replied, even when you weren't there to hear it. At the store, a few customers recognized them. A man in a sheriff's hat muttered something under his breath as they passed. Bikers and charity, what a joke. Luke kept walking, jaw tight. Martha touched his arm. Let them talk. Truth takes time to prove. That evening, she dreamed of Paul again, her late husband. In the dream, he stood by their old farmhouse door, smiling, sunlight all around him. Love is your armor, he said. When she woke, the words stayed with her. The next day, they were back on the road, delivering meals in a borrowed truck. The van still needed repairs, but the mission didn't stop. People lined up gratefully when they saw them coming. Some clapped, some cried, some simply nodded and said, "Thank you," with cracked voices. As they cleaned up after serving, Martha noticed two men watching from across the street. Lean, rough-looking, leaning against black motorcycles. One had a vulture tattoo on his neck. He smirked when he caught her gaze. Luke followed her eyes, his body tensing. Let it go, she whispered. They want you to react. He swallowed hard, then looked away. You make it sound easy. It isn't, she said softly. It's holy work. When they drove off, Martha glanced back. The men were gone. Still, the unease lingered. That night, Sharon came by Martha's apartment for dinner. They sat at the small kitchen table, candles flickering between them. Sharon had been quiet all evening. You're thinking about those men, aren't you? Martha asked. Sharon nodded. They scare me. I used to run with people like that. When they can't control you anymore, they destroy what you love. Martha reached across the table and took her hand. We'll face it together. That's what family does. Sharon smiled weakly. Family? She repeated. I never thought I'd have that word again. Before bed, Martha stood by the window, looking out at the dark stretch of highway. A storm was gathering in the distance, lightning flashing faintly behind the hills. She whispered a prayer, the same one she'd said the night she lost Luke years ago. Keep him safe, Lord. Whatever comes, keep him safe. Out in the desert, thunder rolled, and though she couldn't see it, across town a shadow moved through the night, a figure with a lighter in his pocket and vengeance on his mind. The peace Martha had built was about to burn. The air that evening was heavy, still, and too quiet. The kind of quiet that made Martha's skin prickle. She and Sharon were parked behind the shelter, handing out the last bowls of soup from Grace on wheels. The crowd had thinned, and only the crickets and faraway highway sounds broke the silence. Feels strange tonight, Sharon murmured, glancing up at the low clouds. Martha nodded, uneasy. Storm's coming. Let's pack up early. They were wiping down the serving tables when a sound tore through the air. A distant boom, followed by shouts and the faint wail of sirens. Martha froze, spoon in hand. What was that? Sharon asked, voice trembling. Martha's heart knew before her mind did. The warehouse, she whispered. Luke. Without another word, she grabbed the keys and jumped into the driver's seat. The van rattled to life, and they tore down the back roads toward the edge of town. The night glowed red ahead, an angry light rising above the horizon. When they reached the lot, flames were already climbing high into the sky. The old warehouse, the home of the Hounds of Mercy, was burning like paper. Men shouted, running back and forth with buckets, their faces streaked with soot. Sirens wailed closer, echoing through the desert. Martha flung the door open and ran forward. Luke! She cried. Where's Luke? Diesel appeared through the smoke, coughing hard. He's inside. The dogs! He went back for the dogs! Before she could stop him, Luke stumbled out of the doorway, a small brown mutt tucked under his arm. Flames licked at his jacket, and smoke curled from his hair. He dropped to his knees, gasping for air. Luke! Martha dropped beside him, beating at his sleeve to smother the sparks. What were you thinking? He coughed, voice raw. Couldn't let them die? They're all we've got left. Firefighters rushed past, spraying water, shouting orders. Sharon appeared behind Martha, her face white as ash. They said it was arson, she said breathlessly. Somebody saw a guy on a black bike riding off just before it started. Luke looked up, eyes full of fury and pain. The vultures. The firefighters herded everyone back as the roof began to collapse. The warehouse groaned, then gave way with a deafening crash. The flames roared higher, sparks flying into the dark sky. By dawn, it was nothing but twisted metal and smoke. The air stank of charred wood and oil. The hounds stood in a silent circle, their faces gray, with soot and grief. Martha wrapped a blanket around Luke's shoulders. His hands were raw, blistered. He stared at the ashes like he could still see everything that had been there. The cots, the kitchen, the laughter. A police car rolled up. Detective Nunez stepped out, his expression unreadable. Luke Jensen? Luke looked up, weary. Yeah. You're under arrest for suspicion of arson. Martha's breath caught. What? He saved people. Nunez's voice was flat. We have witnesses saying they saw him at the scene before the fire started, and your record doesn't help. Luke didn't fight as they cuffed him. He just stared down, shoulders heavy. "It's fine, Mom," he said softly. "I'll handle it." Martha stepped forward, trembling. "You can't do this. He's innocent." The detective's eyes softened, but his tone stayed firm. "Ma'am, if he's innocent, the truth will come out." As the cruiser pulled away, Martha stood in the smoke and ruin, her heart cracking open. The morning sun was rising, washing the world in pale gold, but all she saw was gray. Around her, the men began to drift away, silent and defeated. Diesel put a hand on her shoulder. "They'll pin this on him," he said bitterly. "They always do." Martha swallowed hard, tears streaking her soot-covered cheeks. "Then we'll prove them wrong." Sharon wiped her eyes. "But how?" Martha turned toward the ashes, her voice steady, though her heart was breaking. "The same way we've done everything else, with faith and truth and love that doesn't quit." That night, back in her apartment, she sat by the window with Luke's burned jacket across her lap. She traced her fingers over the blackened leather, whispering, "Not again, Lord. Please, not again." The town's news the next morning was cruel. Headlines read, "Biker Angel's son arrested for arson." Hero or hypocrite? The truth about Mama Kay and her hounds. Donations stopped. The church stopped calling. People who had once smiled now crossed the street to avoid her. But inside, Martha's faith burned stronger. The same flame that had destroyed the warehouse now lit something fierce within her. She looked out at the desert horizon and whispered, "You gave me back my son. I won't lose him again." Her hands trembled, but her voice didn't. "Tomorrow," she said to the empty room, "I start finding the truth." And as she blew out the candle by her window, she knew the fight for Luke's redemption, and her own, had only just begun. The next morning, Martha woke before sunrise. For a moment, she didn't remember why her chest felt so heavy. But then the truth came rushing back. The warehouse, the fire, the cuffs on Luke's wrists. The silence in her apartment was deafening. She got up slowly, poured herself coffee, and stood by the window. Outside, the town still slept, calm and ordinary, as if nothing had happened. It made her heartache. How could the world move on while her boy sat behind bars, accused of something he didn't do? She dressed in her plain gray sweater and sensible shoes. Then she tied her scarf, tucked her small Bible into her purse, and whispered to the empty room, "We've got work to do." At the police station, the waiting area smelled of old coffee and worry. A young officer sat at the desk, chewing gum. "Can I help you, ma'am?" "I'm here to see Luke Jensen," she said firmly. "He's my son." The officer frowned. "He's being processed. Might take a bit." Martha folded her hands, sitting down on the plastic chair. She waited. She had waited most of her life. For good news, for lost things, for people to come home. Waiting didn't scare her anymore. After what felt like hours, Detective Nunez appeared. He was a sturdy man with tired eyes. "Mrs. Keegan," he said, recognizing her, "you shouldn't be here." "I'm exactly where I should be," she replied. He sighed. "We have evidence he was at the scene before the fire started. And he has a record, possession, assault, 2 DUIs. The DA won't let this go." Martha met his eyes, steady. "He went back into that fire to save a dog. That's who he is now." Nunez rubbed the back of his neck. "You really believe that, don't you?" "With all my heart." Something flickered in the detective's eyes, a hint of respect, maybe pity. "If you find anything that proves someone else started it, bring it to me. But be careful, ma'am. There are people who want this buried." "I'm not afraid," she said quietly. That afternoon, she went to what was left of the warehouse. The police tape flapped in the wind, bright yellow against the gray ruin. The air still smelled faintly of smoke. Diesel was already there, poking through debris. "Hey, Mama Kay," he said softly. "Didn't think you'd come. I couldn't stay away." She crouched beside him, careful not to step on anything sharp. "Find anything?" "Not much. Some propane tanks exploded, but—" He hesitated, pulling out a half-melted metal canister. "This doesn't belong here. It's lighter fluid, not ours." Martha took it gingerly, studying the label. "Could it prove something?" "Maybe, if we can link it to the vultures." She looked up sharply. "Do you know any of them?" "Yeah," Diesel said grimly. "One of them, name's Brick, used to ride with us before he went bad. He hangs around the scrapyard off Highway 17. Martha nodded, determination lighting her eyes. "Then that's where I'm going." Diesel blinked. "Ma'am, you can't go talk to those people." She stood up straight, dusting her hands. "Watch me." The scrapyard was a sprawl of rust and weeds. Martha's old sedan rolled to a stop beside a pile of crushed cars. She took a deep breath and stepped out, clutching the canister in one hand, her purse in the other. "Can I help you, lady?" The voice came from behind a stack of tires. A man emerged, shaved head, tattooed neck, mean smile. "Are you Brick?" she asked. "Depends who's asking." "The mother of a man you set up?" she said evenly. "Luke Jensen." The smirk vanished. "I don't know what you're talking about." Martha held up the canister. "Then maybe you can explain why this was found in a fire you started." He laughed, but there was a nervous twitch in his jaw. "You don't have proof of anything." "Not yet," she said. "But I have something stronger than proof. I have people who believe in him, and if you're smart, you'll do the right thing before I find the proof myself." Brick stepped closer, towering over her, his breath sour. "Lady, you don't scare me." She didn't flinch. "That's your mistake." For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then another voice came from the shadows. Diesel's. "Back off, Brick." Brick's eyes flicked toward him. Diesel had his phone out, camera rolling. "Say hi to the internet," he said coolly. "Smile for Mama Kay." Brick cursed and turned away. "You're both crazy." They left fast, gravel crunching underfoot. In the car, Martha exhaled shakily. "I wasn't sure that would work." Diesel grinned. "You were perfect, scared the life out of him." They drove back to town in silence, the canister resting between them like fragile gold. That evening, Diesel came by her apartment, excitement in his voice. "You're not going to believe this. I went through some footage from a buddy's dash cam. He was parked near the warehouse the night of the fire. Guess who rides past just before the flames start?" "Brick," she said softly. Diesel nodded. "I sent it to the detective already. He said it might be enough to reopen the case." Martha's knees went weak. She sank into a chair, tears welling in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, voice trembling. "Thank you, Lord." Sharon, who had been listening from the doorway, covered her mouth and began to cry. "He's coming home." "Not yet," Martha said, wiping her eyes. "But soon." That night she couldn't sleep. She sat by the window, the desert moon bright and silver. For the first time in days, hope didn't feel like a distant dream. It felt close, alive, breathing in her chest. Luke had always fought his demons with fists and fire. But now, she thought, maybe love could fight harder. She folded her hands and prayed until dawn, her heart steady and sure. Tomorrow she would stand in court and tell the truth, no matter who believed her. The courtroom buzzed with whispers as Martha stepped forward, her hands trembling but her eyes steady. Luke sat at the defense table, pale from sleepless nights, his burned hands bandaged. The judge's gavel struck once. "Mrs. Keegan, you may speak." Martha cleared her throat. "My son didn't start that fire. He went in to save lives, not destroy them." Her voice shook but grew stronger. "Someone else, one of the vultures, set that blaze, and I can prove it." Diesel stood and handed the dashcam footage to the defense attorney. On the screen, Brick's black motorcycle gleamed under streetlights before the explosion lit the night. The crowd gasped. Detective Nunes watched, his expression softening. "The evidence clears Luke Jensen," he said quietly. Tears ran down Martha's cheeks as Luke was freed. She rushed forward, wrapping her arms around him. "You came home, baby," she whispered. He held her tight, voice thick. "Because you never stopped believing." Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashing, but Martha didn't hear a word. She looked up at the ceiling, heart full. "Thank you, Lord," she whispered. The truth had set them free. The sun rose warm and gold over the desert as Luke walked beside his mother through the empty lot where the warehouse once stood. Workers hammered, laughter echoed, and the scent of fresh wood filled the air. The town had shown up, neighbors, church groups, even strangers to rebuild what was lost. Martha handed out lemonade while the bikers carried lumber and painted new walls. "You see?" she said, smiling softly. "Grace doesn't burn." Luke chuckled, wiping sweat from his brow. "You were right again, Mom." Sharon arrived with boxes of canned food, her face glowing. "We'll have the new kitchen ready by Sunday," she said proudly. Diesel grinned from the roof. "And this time we're adding sprinklers?" Laughter rippled through the crew. For the first time in months, the air felt light again. As evening fell, the lights flickered on, casting golden halos across the fresh paint. Luke turned to Martha, eyes bright. "Thank you for not giving up on me." She squeezed his hand. "A mother's love doesn't quit. It just waits for the right time to bloom." Together they watched the sun dip low, hope rising in its place. Months later, the desert bloomed again. Spring had painted color across the dry hills, and the town buzzed with talk about the grand reopening of Grace on Wheels. The rebuilt warehouse gleamed with a fresh coat of white paint, its doors wide open, filled with the smell of coffee and chili. Over the entrance hung a new sign, "The Hounds of Mercy Community Center." Martha stood in front of the van, her apron spotless, her heart overflowing. It looked brand new, shiny silver hubcaps, polished glass, and angel wings painted across the back doors. Between the wings, in looping red letters, were the words, "Because one woman fed a stranger." Music played from a small speaker, and the crowd clapped as Luke stepped forward. He was still the same tall, rough-edged man, but his eyes were softer now, steady and bright. He hugged his mother before facing the crowd. "This place isn't just about food," he said. "It's about family, the kind that finds you when the world gives up." People cheered, cameras flashed. Diesel honked one of the bikes in celebration, making everyone laugh. Sharon handed out bread, smiling wider than she had in years. Martha's cheeks were wet with tears, but they were happy ones. Later, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, Martha stood beside the van, handing a warm bowl of soup to a man in worn boots. "You're welcome here any time," she told him. The man nodded, eyes glassy. "I ain't had anyone say that in years," he murmured. Luke came to stand beside her, wiping his hands on a rag. "You did it, Mom," he said softly. She shook her head. "No, we did it. All of us who refused to stop believing." The sound of motorcycles hummed gently in the distance, no longer a symbol of fear, but of redemption. As dusk settled over the desert, Lanterns flickered to life along the tables, their light warm and golden. A young reporter stepped forward and asked, "Mrs. Keegan, after everything that happened, what keeps you going?" Martha smiled, her voice tender but strong. "Because love never retires. It just keeps finding new ways to show up." Luke draped an arm around her shoulders, proud and unashamed. "That's my mom," he said to the reporter. She looked up at him, eyes shining, and whispered, "And every lost soul is my child." The crowd applauded as the van's engine rumbled to life. Grace on Wheels rolled forward, headlights cutting through the deepening twilight, bound for another corner of town where hungry hearts waited. Behind them, the laughter of the redeemed lingered in the warm desert air, proof that one act of kindness can set 1,000 miracles in motion. The van gleamed under sunset light, its angel wings shining. Martha handed out soup beside Luke as laughter filled the air. Reporters watched as she smiled warmly. "Love never quits," she said. Luke wrapped an arm around her. "That's my mom," he whispered. Hope filled the night. Thank you for listening. Stories connect us in the most unexpected ways. If you felt that spark today, make sure you're subscribed. I share a new one daily, and the next might change your day.